Evening, everybody. My name is Brooke Ramsey, and today we will be going over our lesson over persuasive writing. And first, before we even get into anything, the objectives of today are students will be able to clearly state their thesis with supporting claims. Students will support their claims slash opinion with reasons and evidence. So, first, before we get into anything, we will go over a PowerPoint explaining to us what persuasive writing and the details within that. And we will be taking notes along with this. So go ahead and open up your notebook. Okay, so persuasive writing. What is persuasive writing? So, persuasive writing is a piece of writing which you try to convince the reader or your audience what you believe. You're basically arguing your opinion and you have to make your point and back it up with evidence. So you either take the position of being against the topic or you take the position of being for the topic. So the do's and don'ts of persuasive writing. So to start off, your essay should be at least 5 paragraphs. Okay. So you're going to have your introduction, and within your introduction, your first sentence should be your hook. So your hook is going to be something to be able to draw the audience in, make them want to keep reading. Okay, so then your next do you need to have a thesis in your introduction, and we will go into what your thesis is a little bit later down the line. You also have to come up with 3 points that support your stance slash your argument um, with what you're fighting against or for, and you're going to close with your conclusion. So, our don'ts. We do not want to start our essay off with, "Hello, my name is Brooke, and I'm going to write about social media and children." That's not how we introduce our topics or our arguments because that's not engaging in any way, shape, or form. So we also want to make sure that we are being bold with our statements. We're going to try to refrain from using I. For example, there should be no, for example, when I say be bold, I say there should be no homework, not I feel that there should be no homework. I think that there should be no homework. No, you need to be able to be bold with what you're saying so that people believe what you're saying. That's the whole point of it, persuasive writing, is to get people to side with your stance or your argument of your topic. So again, we're going to refrain from using I and we're going to stick to there should be no homework or this should happen, not I feel. So another thing we are not going to do throughout our persuasive writing is straddle the fence. We're not going to say, well, I mean, there should be homework, but then there shouldn't be. And that means that you don't have any confidence in what you are presenting. So we want to make sure that we have confidence throughout our writing and we are going to pick a side. Now, there will be a portion of your essay where you will counter your argument, but you will still come back and explain why your stance is the best stance. So I did say we're not going to use I, but some persuasive language is I urge you, I encourage you. And when we use this language, we are mainly focusing on maybe we will use the I in our conclusion when we're trying to push our point at the very end of our essay. But other than that, we're going to stick to my opinion is the advantages of this is this. You should consider, not you may want to consider no, you should consider and make sure that you do this. So we also want to use it is crucial or this clearly shows. Okay. Introduction. So in our introduction is our very first paragraph of our essay. And like we talked about before, this will include your hook and it will include your thesis statement. So your hook should interest the reader and it should make them want to continue to read your essay. So your hook could maybe be a joke, it could be a statistic, a question, a bold statement, or it could be a quote from a famous person, or maybe just something that you hear very often, or whatever the case may be. So, a statistic would be 40% of people feel this way. And I feel that a statistic is something that will make people be like, okay, well, let me listen to what she's saying because she's coming with facts. This is not just her opinion, but she's backing it up with some facts. When you start putting numbers in people's face and they start to believe it a little bit more. Okay, so you can also use a joke to lighten up the mood, or like I said, a question and a bold statement is something that is very important as well, because as we were talking about confidence before, if you come in confident, they have no other reason but to believe you. So, your thesis statement and your supporting statements. So, your thesis statement should be one sentence. Okay, it shouldn't be your whole paragraph, it shouldn't be spaced out. Your thesis statement should be one sentence that states your opinion at the end of the introduction paragraph. And it needs to be something that's strong. And within your thesis statement, you will have three main points that you get to pick to support your argument. Um, each point will be your three body paragraphs. For example, if I'm talking about social media use with children, a good strong thesis statement would be children shouldn't be allowed on social media because it increases bullying rates, ruins self-esteem, and leads them into the hands of predators. So that's something that is very strong. And now I have my three supporting statements. So you have your statements on why you feel the way you feel, but you also want to include a counter argument. So while students should voice their opinion, they should also show the other side of the topic. So, for example, we're going to use the social media again. So, many children wouldn't agree that social media is bad for them. Some may state that it helps them make a connection with family and friends. Others may argue that it allows them to express themselves freely. However, the cons outweigh the pros. And that's just a short example. Of course, you will go on and continue with this paragraph, but that's just the intro to explaining the other viewpoint. And then you'll go back in and include your stance again in this counter argument. So we have reached the conclusion. So within the conclusion, you should summarize all of your main points made throughout your essay. And you're always going to restate your thesis in your conclusion. So you can end your essay by providing a solution, and it doesn't have to be a solution. It can also be making a prediction, and you can also call somebody to action. So in providing a solution, a good example would be social media doesn't have to be bad. It should just be heavily monitored for children under the age of 12. So then this gives people an option. Um, you're not necessarily forcing, but you're saying, okay, well, this can make this better if we do this. We don't have to eliminate it totally, but this can make it better. So in making a prediction, a good example would be If children continue to use social media without restrictions, many more children will fall into a state of depression and self-esteem issues. Um, Calling to action, a good example for that would be parents need to keep an eye out on their children's social media use to prevent a harsh outcome. So, in calling to action, this is something that is very bold. And that's why I used in my example the word need, because that means this is something that's very important for you to do and makes people take you more seriously. So now we're going to move on to our brainstorming. And this is a little graphic organizer that we put together. Your first, that top box underneath Persuade Me, that is where your thesis statement goes. So those boxes underneath your thesis statement are going to be your reasons. So how it would be filled out if I'm talking about children and social media, and I said my thesis statement, let's go back to what my thesis statement was. So at the in that top box, I would put children shouldn't be allowed on social media. So that's just the beginning of my thesis without my that's my thesis slash my opinion. And then underneath that box, there are three different boxes. So it says first reason, second reason, third reason. In my first reason, it would be increases bullying rates. My second reason would be ruin self-esteem. My third reason would be leads them into the hands of predators. Underneath those reasons, you will use factual evidence. You can use statistics. You can use stuff from journal articles, from reliable sources. So things like edu.org. Like I said, journal articles can be good for these types of essays. And then at the bottom will be your conclusion, in which you will include your just you wrapping up everything. Also, I want you to include in that top box your hook. So your hook is going to be in that box as well as the beginning of your thesis statement. So moving on a little bit further down in the class as they not further down. This is your options for themes. So everybody, there are 5 prompts that you can choose from, and you can choose your stance on these topics. So our first prompt is, should schools ban phones during the school day? Our second prompt is, should social media platforms require stricter age requirements? Number 3, should kids 12 and up be able to vote? Our fourth one is, are video games bad? Number 5, are group projects fair? So y'all will be able to choose out of these 5 prompts what you would like to write about. Choose something that interests you the most out of these 5 prompts and go ahead and finish your brainstorming activity. Okay, so a little bit further down in class, so students are finished brainstorming at this point. They've completed their graphic organizer. Um, like I said, this should include their hook and their thesis, their 3 supporting points backed up with their facts and evidence. And then in the bottom is their conclusion. Um, next, next we'll move into working on our rough draft, and we will use our graphic organizer to help us start our rough draft. They get done with their rough draft, then we will move forward and they will do peer review. So students will swap their rough drafts. They will look for persuasive language throughout their essay. They will also look for grammar mistakes, spelling errors, comma use, and make sure that they have good transitions throughout their essays, such as however, additionally, um, furthermore, transitions like that throughout their essays. Students will, as they peer review, they will also check if the opinion slash thesis is strong, if the evidence or their supporting arguments is strong. Um, and yeah, go back and see if what they're saying actually makes sense. Does this essay flow? That's what they're looking for. So at the end, um, lesson, students will complete their essay by applying the feedback that has been provided by their peers. I will also go back and do feedback on my own, but I really want to make sure they're collaborative with this assignment. Um, they will finish by doing reflections on this process of writing their essay. So they will write these questions down in their notebook, and the questions will be, was this an easy or hard essay to them? Did receiving feedback help you along with the process of writing your essay? And what is something different that you would do as you write your next essay? And that is the